Hi, so it's another video again of us learning how to read, and we are reading a book by Tracy Kelly, Murder at Longburn. Before even we start reading, can I just come clean? I was this close not to reading this book, this close, but just because this reading this reading journey is also part of my consistency journey. That's why I have to show up. I have to read this book, you know. That's why we're doing it right now. I just had to put it out there. Like, I was this close. I was just about to say okay. I was just about to say okay, um I'm gonna read it later on. But if I do that, I know myself, it will become a pattern, and I'll end up not doing whatever I am working hard to do. So we have to continue reading this book. As usual, every chapter starts with a quote, and the quote in chapter 6 goes by as, "The sooner every party breaks up, the better." And the quote was by Jane Austen Emma. So let's start reading chapter 6. I don't know how long we all stared at Gerald before Lawrence shrieks startled stared us out of our stupor. Stupor. Na hii chapter imeanza strong. Oh, what is that? Stupor. Lawrence shrieks. Hata hiyo sijui ni nini. Startled. Startled, I think ni ile ni kama najua meaning ya start, lakini kuiexplain ni kama kutushtua ama I don't know. I think I know the meaning, but they search to start us out of our anyway. She ran to where Gerald lay on the floor and screamed his name and pushed at his shoulder as if he had merely fallen asleep. Polly, on the other hand, stood motionless, gazing at her father with an unblinked stare. She seemed rooted to the dance floor. Her face was so deathly pale. I thought she must be in shock. Daniel stood behind her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, pulling her close. Peter got to Gerald a split second after Lauren and began checking for the life signs. We all feared weren't the, we all feared checking for life signs we all feared weren't there. He pulled back Gerald's suitcase. "In case you hear any noise, please." Pardon me. There's nothing I can do about it. Gerald's suitcase. Against the crisp white shirt, a crimson stain was spreading rapidly. He felt for a pulse and then slowly shook his head. Without a word, Aunt Winnie ran from the room. I presumed that she was calling the police. Tom, whom only minutes before was playing the role of a philandering husband, spoke first. "We need to secure this room," he said with brisk authority. "No one touches anything." His cool and professional manner puzzled me until I bleatly remembered Eric mentioning that Tom was a retired police officer. Daniel stepped forward. "What the hell are you people playing at?" He glared at the actors. "A man is dead because of you. How could you let this happen?" Eric jaws dropped open in shock as he squeaked, his Adam apple bopping up and down like a cock. We had nothing to do with this. We are actors doing a show. We don't even use guns. Well, one of you blundered then, because in case you haven't noticed, this man is dead, Daniel retorted hotly. Eric shook his head. You don't understand. We don't use guns at all. Real or prop, in our show, the victim is stabbed. Eric, next to Eric, Susie adamantly nodded in agreement, her tawny hair falling over her shoulders as if to corroborate Eric's statement. She held up a realistic looking plastic knife. When the lights came back on, she said, I was supposed to be on the floor with this beside me. A tiny part of my brain detached itself from the fact that I was standing 10 feet from a dead man and silently crowned that I had correctly guessed Susie as the intended victim. Because of this, it took me a minute for the full meaning of Eric's words to sink in. Gerald Ramsey's death was an accident. He'd been murdered. Oh my God, gasped John as she stared at Gerald's body. But who would want to? She sagged heavily into Henry. Her question left unfinished as she yanked her hand up to cover her mouth. Her eyes flew to Polly before she closed them as if in prayer. Jackie made a small noise. We all looked her way. Did you say something, Jackie? Asked Lynette. But Jackie slowly shook her head and turned away. Lynette eyed Tom as if he were nothing more than an ick, some insect. I don't know who you think you are, but I am not going to stay in the same room with a dead man. A man who was apparently murdered, no less. This is absurd. Who are you to tell us what we can and cannot do? Tom listened calmly to Lynette's tirade, but remained firm. He probably had years of dealing with reluctant witness. My name is Tom Cooper, he said. I'm a retired police officer. I understand that this is difficult, but trust me, it's necessary. Tom's reply had no effect on Lynette's ire. Well, Mr. Cooper, I know my rights and you simply cannot keep me here against my will. She marched to her seat where her purse lay. Whipping out her cell phone, she yanked off the clip-on earring, saying, I'm calling my lawyer. I know my rights. Do you have any idea who I am? All I know is that you are a potential suspect in a murder case, Tom replied. Lynette bristled as he continued unfazed. No one is to leave this room. We must secure the scene and wait for the police. Antoine returned. With a sober glance at Tom, she quietly said, They are on their way. Randy walked over to Lynette. I realize that this is a horrible situation, Miss Weston, he said soothingly, and that what you are being asked to do is quite extraordinary. But I really think we should do as he says. It will most likely make matters easier when the police do arrive. I am sure that your gracious tolerance of the situation will be appropriately acknowledged. I wondered exactly how Randy thought the police were going to acknowledge Lynette's gracious tolerance of the situation. I had an inkling that nothing short of a parade would assuage her monotonous ego. Lynette continued to glare at Tom, but Randy's words seemed to mollify her. She still watched the proceedings with an icy frown. her rigid posture radiating displeasure. However, she did put her cell phone back and replaced her clip on. Jackie glanced anxiously at her friend, but said nothing. Aunt Winnie walked over to Lauren, standing mutely beside Gerald, and gently took her by the shoulders, easing her way from the body, pulling Lauren to her. She guided her towards one of the chairs. After Lauren was seated, Aunt Winnie walked over to Polly, whispered something to her, drew her close, and led her to the chair next to Lauren. The rest of us stood awkwardly, eyeing one another suspiciously. The band of actors seemed especially ill at ease. No longer in character, they huddled together on one side of the room. As planned, there had been a murder tonight, but the premises had shifted. Now they were now they were the spectators, and we were the show. I was struck by the resemblance of the scene to an Edward Gorey cartoon came to life. A room full of unease, elegantly dressed people, some standing, some sitting, and none of them making eye contact. And of course, in the midst of this strange tableau, tableau. It's not a cartoon. I thought it's real. And one of these elegantly dressed people just killed a man. A wave of dizziness overtook me, and I sat down heavily on one of the chairs and stared at the floor. Peter appeared beside me. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "Of course, I am not all right," I shot back. My voice a strained whisper. "A man is dead, murdered." Nodding in Gerald's direction, I caught sight of his dead, staring eyes and grimaced. A wave of nausea overtook me, and I buried my head in my hands. Peter walked over to the bar. Tom backed out at him. "What are you doing?" Peter turned, giving Tom a level look. He said evenly, "Elizabeth feels sick. I'm getting her a glass of water." Tom nodded his approval. "Does anybody else want anything?" Peter asked. Both Jackie and Lynette shook their heads, as did Joan and Henry. Lauren and Polly appeared not even to have heard the question. Randy stepped forward. "I think Winfred could use something," he said. Aunt Winnie nodded gratefully. "I could do with a spot of something, but it isn't a glass of bloody water," muttered Daniel, as he turned and rapidly walked to the bar. He poured 3 generous glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Lauren and one to Polly. The last one he drank himself in short order. Peter poured the glass of water and came to hand it to me. "Here," he said, "drink this." I took the glass, but I didn't drink from it. I was quite sure that I was about to be spectacularly ill. Peter must have sensed this too, for after a moment he took the glass away. "Put your head between your knees," he ordered. "You look like you are about to pass out." While I blinked at his dictatorial tone, I was too dizzy to argue with him, and so I did as he said, forcing the image of Gerald's lifeless face out of my head. I concentrated I concentrated on slowly filling my lungs with air and letting it out just as slowly. I don't know how long I sat like that, but gradually my stomach felt less like it had been on a cheap roadside carnival ride. I sat back in my chair. Peter eyed me cautiously. Better, yes, I said. Sorry, I snapped at you. Don't worry about it, he said simply. Would you like the water now? I nodded, even though I really didn't, but it gave me something to do with my hands. When I was little and was scared or upset, I would count to myself. I don't know why, but I found the routine repetition of numbers soothing. I reverted to my old tricks now as Peter and I sat with the body of Gerard Ramsay in Aunt Winnie's dining room. Nobody said another word until 5 to 6 seconds later when we finally heard the sirens. Desperate to get out of the room, I volunteered to open the door for the police. At the front door, I stood for a moment, breathing in deeply the icy cold air and trying to settle my queasy stomach. The storm was in full swing now, and the lights from the ambulance and police cars made an eerie kaleidoscope of color in the swirling snow. Two paramedics pulled a Groony down from the ambulance, and two policemen jumped from their cars. I, I motioned them in and quickly led them to the dining room. I pointed in Gerald's direction. He's over there, I added unnecessarily. The first officer surveyed the room and announced, I am Lieutenant Jensen. He was a tall man with a lanky build and fleshy face. Tom stepped forward. He introduced himself and so socially provided Lieutenant Jensen with a brief report. Moving away, they spoke in terse whispers, leaving the rest of us trying to discern their seemingly coded speech. Once briefed, Lieutenant Jensen moved to where Gerald lay. Kneeling beside the body, he asked, "Who is he?" Peter answered, "Gerald Ramsay. He lives in town." Lieutenant Jensen nodded. "I'm familiar with the name." He stared at Gerald's face a moment, then leaned back on his haunches. "Okay, what exactly happened?" he asked, as the first paramedic examined Gerald's body. The paramedic's name tag identified him as Todd. He had long black hair pulled back into a ponytail. A blurry tattoo of a peace sign picked out occasionally from underneath his thin white shirt cuff as he performed his examination. "I'm not really sure," replied Antoine. "It all happened so fast. We were waiting for the murder." Lieutenant Jensen jerked his head, staring at Antoine, and realized how she sounded. Flustered, she tried to explain. "What I mean is," she said quickly, "that this is a dinner theater party of sorts. Some of the guests are hired actors. They pretend to kill someone. One of them," she pointed at the actors, "and then the rest of us were supposed to try to solve the mystery of who committed the murder." I wonder if Lieutenant Jensen played much poker. If he did, I bet he won a lot. He gazed steadily at Antoine, giving no clue to what he was thinking. He nodded for Antoine to continue. "She did. Well, anyway, I turned the lights off as planned at about 11 o'clock. Once the lights were off, one of the actors was supposed to be murdered, but instead we heard a gunshot, and when the lights went back on, we saw Gerald. During Winnie's narration, Lieutenant Jason and Jensen had pulled out a small notebook. He now rapidly scribbled into it. Todd, the paramedic, finished his brief exam of the body. Gunshot wound to the chest, he said, stating what I thought was a fairly obvious fact. Did anyone touch or move the body? Lieutenant Jason asked. Peter answered. After the lights came on and saw him on the floor, he ran over to see if he was alive. He paused. I pulled back his suit coat and tried to find a pulse, but that was all. Anyone else? No one said anything. Although we all looked at Lauren, she was still sitting next to Polly at the table at Polly at one of the tables. Polly was smoking mechanically, and I wondered if she was even aware of her actions. Lauren was sitting bolt upright, staring blankly in front of her. They had neither spoken nor looked at each other since the gruesome discovery of Gerald's body. They were also completely dry-eyed. I found this a little sad, but not very surprising, given the kind of man Gerald Ramsey appeared to have been. Lauren's earlier hysteria and given way to a zombie-like numbness, and I hadn't seen any reaction at all from Polly. In fact, they were so devoid of emotion that a stranger to the night events would be hard pressed to detect anything amiss in their manner. The only indication that something was wrong was Polly's hand. It shook slightly as she took a drag from her cigarette. Are you, are you Miss Ramsey? Lieutenant Jensen said, following her eyes at the sound of her name. Lauren swung vacant blue eyes in the lieutenant's direction, but doubted that she'd heard anything else. Her expression was dazed and her eyes unfocused. Lauren, said Polly sharply. Lauren snapped back. I'm sorry, what did you say? Did you move or touch the body in any way, ma'am? Move him? No. When the lights came back on, I saw that Gerald was on the floor. I thought he might have had a heart attack. I ran over to him, and then Peter pulled back his coat, and I saw her face crumbled, and I thought she was going to cry. Instead, she gazed at Lieutenant Jensen with a lost expression. He was dead. She continued softly. This all seems like a dream. She paused a moment and repeated, Gerald dead, and shook her head as if she couldn't quite believe it. He was so strong. I thought he'd live forever. She lapsed back into silence. I thought her words odd. After all, it wasn't as if Gerald had suffered a heart attack. Someone had shot him in the chest. I looked at Polly to see how she was faring. She was staring at Lauren with a tired expression, but she said nothing. She silently turned her head away and took another long drag from her cigarette. Lieutenant, Jason noted everything down. Well, we'll need to take statements from everyone individually. Is there somewhere private we can do that? He asked Antoine. Well, we'll need to clear the room and look for evidence. Of course, Antoine answered. You can use my office. It's off the foyer. I doubted how productive Lieutenant Jason's interviews would be if they were conducted in Antoine's tiny, messy office. I had a sudden image of Lieutenant Jensen's lanky frame squashed and half hidden behind a desk piled high in the catalogs and papers, trying to carry out a serious interview with a suspect who, for a lack of space, was forced to stand pressed against a wall, papered in a faded rose. in a faded roses. I was about to suggest that the reading room might be more comfortable when a hissing sound from the corner distracted me. It was Lady Catherine. She was standing next to her pillow bed with a particularly peevish expression on her failing face. In the center of her bed, and the apparent reason for her displeasure, laying a gun. It had a carved wooden handle and was so small that at first glance it looked like a toy, especially as it lay nestled among Lady Catherine's embroidered pillows. But this was no toy, it was a derringer, and unless I was very much mistaken, it was the gun that had killed Gerard Ramsay. Next to it lay a crumpled white glove. Well, well, said Lieutenant Jensen with a grim smile. Look what the cat dragged in. Almost as if on cue, the grandfather clock in the foyer chimed midnight. Happy New Year! Yo, I am happy that I've been able to read the whole chapter, but if you can tell, I am exhausted. I haven't slept, I'm feeling sleepy, and I'm so happy that I've been able to read this book today. What I know is I will not come with an update video because there is a lot of noise around me, but once I'm done, I guess we will, once I've slept, can you hear what I'm talking about? Once I've slept, once I wake up, we will come with an update video. But right now I cannot do any update video because there is a lot of noise around me. The important thing was to do this reading video so that I can keep up with the consistency. So yeah, if you have gotten up to here, thank you for watching my videos and thank you for supporting me. Ciao.